on my birthday. It's my birthday. I'm just blessed to see another year around the earth.
11-year-old called her mother back in Seattle, telling her she had been stabbed. After calling police, that mother then called the home back, where police say the suspect picked up the phone and he was breathing heavy as he told the woman her daughter was asleep.
Learned the victims were 53-year-old Mioshi McLoud and 11-year-old Myel Harris. Family tells me McLoud was extremely talented and was a singer. They also say she was all about her family. Singing was her life, and so was her family.
They was beautiful. They was so beautiful.
Imagine for a moment that you wake up one day, just like any other, only to be hit with the shocking news that someone you love has been taken from this world. Not just anyone, but a family member, a mother and her young child, two innocent souls. What makes this pain even harder to bear? The fact that it was their own flesh and blood who did it. How do you even begin to process that? How does a family member, someone you thought you could trust, become capable of something so horrendous? This was the devastating reality for Mioshi McLoud, a woman known for her beautiful voice and her dreams of becoming a successful artist, and her granddaughter, Myel Harris, a sweet, innocent 11-year-old who had her whole life ahead of her. The two were brutally murdered inside their own home in St. Louis, Missouri, by none other than Mioshi's own son, LaRente Okain. But this story doesn't start with the murders. It begins long before the blood was spilled, long before the screams echoed through that quiet neighborhood. It starts with a family that seemed just like any other, a mother, a son, and her granddaughter, simply trying to make a new life in a new city. But beneath the surface, things were far from what they appeared. Mioshi, a talented woman with dreams of making it big as an artist under the stage name Black Sapphire, had always poured everything into her music. She sang, she rapped, she fought hard for recognition, but despite her talent, success seemed just out of reach. She kept going, determined to keep her family together. And then came a new chapter, St. Louis. The hope of a fresh start, a better life for herself and Myel. What could have been a hopeful beginning quickly turned into a nightmare that no one saw coming. You see, LaRente Okain, Mioshi's son, had been a violent man for years. His criminal record was long and ugly. Assault, robbery, possession of firearms, and more. Mioshi had tried to help him. She had tried to protect him, to get him the help he needed, but somewhere along the way, she lost control. Her son, once a boy she loved dearly, became someone that even she couldn't save. And then came the warning signs, calls to the police, threats from LaRente that no one took seriously enough. Mioshi's attempts to get a restraining order fell through, and the situation only escalated. The worst part? The chilling message LaRente sent out just hours before the murders. You guys better pray for your people. What was he planning? Why did no one take this seriously? Could anyone have stopped him? And could Mioshi have done more? These questions haunt the hearts of everyone who knew her. It was on June 15th, when everything finally came to a head. Mioshi's daughter, Mishri, received a call from her daughter, Myel, telling her that LaRente had attacked her. Mishri tried calling back, but LaRente answered, his voice cold, and said Myel was just sleeping. But no one was sleeping. When the police arrived, they found a horror that no one could have imagined. Mioshi and Myel were both lifeless, brutally stabbed, surrounded by knives. The bloodstained scene painted a grim picture of what had unfolded. How could this have happened? How could a son, a brother, do something so violent? What pushed him to the edge? The community was left reeling, shocked by the horror that had unfolded in their quiet neighborhood. And now, it's time to understand the deeper issues, mental health, violence, and the failures of systems that should have intervened. LaRente Okain's history of instability had been there for years, but the help he needed never came. This tragedy forces us to look at our mental health care systems and question, how many more families will suffer because the proper support is missing? Stay tuned as we uncover the chilling details, the mistakes that were made, and the lessons we all need to learn from this senseless tragedy. Before we continue, if this story has already left you gasping, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the rest of this heart-wrenching investigation. Trust me, you won't want to miss the details we'll uncover next. Mioshi McLoud, a woman full of dreams, had always known she was destined for something bigger. Known by her stage name Black Sapphire, she was a woman with a powerful voice, a force in the music industry, trying to carve out a space for herself in a world that often felt like it wasn't made for people like her. She was a singer and rapper, someone who could move a crowd with her talent and passion. Mioshi wasn't just performing. She was pouring her heart out every time she stepped on stage. She had big dreams. Dreams of making it to the top, of being heard and seen by the world. She performed across Seattle, hoping that every note she sang, every verse she rapped, would bring her closer to the recognition she craved. She worked alongside her two sons, including LaRente Okain, who was part of the team under the name Pressure. Together, they blended her soulful melodies with his raw, gritty rapping, creating something unique, something that caught the attention of a few but never fully broke through. Mioshi's career in music never reached the heights she imagined. Despite her undeniable talent, the dream of making it big seemed to always slip further from her grasp. She never stopped working, though. She kept going, motivated by the love she had for her family and the hope that one day her moment would come. But as years passed, she realized that her journey to success might look different from what she'd imagined. It wasn't the fame she had been chasing, it was a better life for her children. And so, she made a decision that would change everything. In 2023, Mioshi decided it was time to start fresh. The music scene in Seattle hadn't given her the opportunity she hoped for, so she packed up her life, leaving behind the familiarity of the city, and moved with her granddaughter, Myel, to St. Louis. She hoped this new city would offer her a better shot at finding work, a fresh start where she could make a living and finally provide the life she wanted for her family. A new beginning, a new chapter. For her, this move wasn't just about geography, it was about hope. The kind of hope that can push you to make big decisions, even when the future is uncertain. But what was meant to be a new beginning for Mioshi and Myel soon became a tragic nightmare. In St. Louis, they were met with challenges, but Mioshi didn't let that stop her. She found work and security, settled into a new home, and began to make a life for herself. But the fresh start she sought was constantly overshadowed by the past, her past with her son, LaRente Okain. LaRente, a man she once loved as a mother loves her child, had been a constant source of worry and pain. His criminal history was long, and it painted a dark picture of the man he had become. Assault, robbery, and felony firearm possession were just a few of the charges that defined LaRente's troubled past in Seattle. He wasn't a stranger to the law, but it wasn't just his criminal actions that troubled Mioshi. It was the unpredictability, the volatility of his behavior. LaRente's anger seemed to simmer just below the surface, and it wasn't long before his issues began to creep into his mother's life. Despite his violent history, LaRente moved in with Mioshi and Myel. A mother's love can make her blind to the danger her child might pose, and Mioshi, hopeful for change, welcomed him into her home. She wanted to help him, to give him a chance at redemption, to fix what was broken. But sometimes, the things that are broken can never be fixed. From the start, there were signs, small things at first. LaRente's temper was short, and his outbursts became more frequent. He seemed unstable, his mood shifting between anger and remorse without warning. Mioshi, now facing the reality of her choices, was left trying to navigate the fragile lines between love, responsibility, and fear. Every day felt like walking on eggshells, not knowing if the next argument would escalate into something worse. But this wasn't just about his behavior. LaRente's mental health had been deteriorating for some time. He wasn't just angry, he was lost, spiraling in a world where his demons had grown too powerful. Mioshi saw the change in him, but she didn't know how to help. How do you save someone who doesn't want to be saved? How do you protect yourself and your family when the person who should be a protector is the one causing harm? Her attempts to intervene were met with resistance. She called the police multiple times, reporting threats and aggressive behavior, but it seemed like nothing was enough. LaRente's violence wasn't enough to get him the help he desperately needed. There were even talks of a restraining order, but Mioshi never followed through with it. It felt too final, too much like giving up on him. Maybe she was afraid of what would happen if she did. Could she still call herself a mother if she turned her back on her own son? The internal struggle played out daily in Mioshi's heart. Then, in a moment that felt almost like a warning, LaRente posted a chilling message online. "You guys better pray for your people." What did it mean? Was it a cry for help? Or was it something far more terrifying? Mioshi didn't know, but she felt something stir in her, a gut feeling that things were about to change. She just didn't know how quickly or how painfully it would all unfold. As LaRente's mental health continued to deteriorate, Mioshi was left grappling with the hardest decision of her life. How do you protect the ones you love when the greatest danger comes from within? LaRente's behavior had always been a cause for concern. As the months passed, the cracks in his character grew wider, and the once loving son Mioshi knew seemed to be slipping further away. It wasn't just that he was angry, it was that the anger seemed to consume him, turning him into someone he wasn't. No one could quite understand what was happening to him. LaRente had always been unpredictable, but now, even the smallest thing could set him off. His family watched in horror as he began to unravel. Mioshi tried to protect her granddaughter, Myel, and herself, but it wasn't easy. She had called the police multiple times after LaRente made threats that made her fear for their safety. He wasn't just threatening them with words. His actions were starting to match the violence in his heart. Despite all the calls to the authorities, despite all the evidence of his erratic behavior, nothing seemed to change. The police didn't do enough. No one seemed to notice just how dangerous things were becoming. Mioshi, desperate to do something, anything, about the situation, had even taken steps to get a restraining order against her son. But, tragically, she never followed through. Was it fear of what would happen if she did? Or perhaps it was the bond she still held on to, the hope that he would somehow change, that he wasn't beyond saving. Her love for him blinded her to the danger, and now, as time passed, that danger was creeping closer, inch by inch, until it would eventually consume everything. Everything felt like it was slipping out of control. The phone calls to the police, the arguments, the strange and unsettling atmosphere in the house. Mioshi couldn't escape the growing feeling that something terrible was coming. But no one could have predicted just how horrible it would be. How could they? The warning signs were there, but no one truly believed that the violence would escalate to such an extreme. It started like any other day, but by the end of it, everything had changed. Mioshi's daughter, Mishri, received a call from her own daughter, Myel, that would send a chill through her entire body. Myel, only 11 years old, was on the other end of the line, breathless and panicked. "Mom, I've been stabbed." The words were clear, but they didn't feel real. How could this be happening? Why would LaRente do something like this? Mishri's heart must have dropped, but before she could process the shock, the call ended abruptly. In the midst of the panic, she quickly tried calling the house again. This time, it wasn't Myel who answered, it was LaRente. His voice was heavy, almost strained. "She's sleeping," he said, almost casually, as if nothing was wrong. But Mishri knew. She could feel it in her bones. Something was wrong, something was horribly wrong. She immediately called the police and rushed to see things for herself. But by the time police reached the home, what they found would haunt them forever. Inside, the scene was a nightmare. There, in the quiet of the home that had once been filled with hope, lay Mioshi and Myel, both of them dead, stabbed, violently. Their bodies were surrounded by blood, and there were knives scattered around them. It was an image that no one could shake from their minds. The officers knew immediately this wasn't just a domestic dispute gone wrong. This was something far more gruesome, a brutal act that would shatter a family and a community. Neighbors, who had once seen Mioshi and Myel coming and going, were left in disbelief. They'd never imagined such violence could take place in their peaceful neighborhood. The police cars, the yellow crime scene tape, the paramedics rushing in and out, it all felt so surreal. One neighbor, watching from a distance, spoke of the horror of seeing the ambulance pull away, knowing that the lives of two innocent people had been stolen away in the most violent way imaginable. The questions lingered. Why did LaRente do it? What was going through his mind in those final moments? His chilling message, "You guys better pray for your people," had seemed like a warning, but no one had believed it would end like this. And yet, here they were, a mother and granddaughter, both gone, taken too soon. It was a shocking tragedy, but it was also a painful reminder of the warning signs that were ignored. Mioshi had called the police multiple times, sought help, and even considered a restraining order. But in the end, none of it was enough. There had been so many signs, so many chances for someone to step in. But in the end, the system failed to protect them. And this, tragically, is the story of so many families. The ones who don't know where to turn when the danger comes from within, from someone they love. The systems in place, mental health care, law enforcement, the very institutions meant to protect families, often fail to stop the worst from happening. Now, as we delve deeper into what follows and what could have been done to prevent this, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed warning signs in a relationship or family dynamic that raise concerns? Let us know in the comments section. It's so important to recognize these red flags early, before it's too late. In the days following the brutal murders, the small community was left in a daze. No one could quite understand how it had come to this. A mother and her granddaughter, both innocent, their lives violently taken in the place they called home. How had a son, a brother, someone who was once part of their lives, become capable of such a horrific act? It was a question that lingered in the air, unanswered, hanging over everyone who knew Mioshi and Myel. The loss hit so hard, not just for their family, but for the entire neighborhood. Mioshi had been loved by so many. She was a singer, a mother, a woman with a dream that never fully came to fruition. But what truly shocked people was that LaRente Okain, her son, had done this. He was no stranger to violence. His troubled history had been well known, and his struggles with mental illness were something that many around him could see. Still, no one imagined that things would escalate to this point. This tragedy has opened up a broader conversation about mental health, one that many have avoided for far too long. LaRente's mental health challenges were not new. He had a history of instability, anger, and violent outbursts. Those close to him had seen the signs. There were threats, calls to the police, and incidents of violence. Yet, despite these clear warning signs, no intervention seemed to come in time. The system failed him, and in doing so, it failed Mioshi and Myel. It's a heartbreaking truth, but one that can't be ignored. Despite being diagnosed with mental health issues, LaRente wasn't getting the help he needed. There was no adequate treatment or supervision to manage his condition. And as tragic as it is, this is the reality for many people struggling with mental illness. They fall through the cracks. The systems that are meant to protect them and keep their families safe often fail to do so. Mioshi tried to get help for her son. She reached out, called the police, even considered a restraining order. But in the end, those efforts weren't enough. If LaRente had been receiving the proper care, could this tragedy have been prevented? Could Mioshi and Myel still be alive today? The answers to these questions are hard to swallow, but they are questions that need to be asked. As a society, we must demand accountability. We must hold the systems that are supposed to care for our vulnerable members accountable. The failures in LaRente's case cannot be ignored. If we want to prevent tragedies like this from happening again, we need to ensure that proper care and supervision are in place for those who need it most. If this story has made you realize just how important this issue is, please subscribe and share this video. Raise awareness. Make your voice heard. Let's work together to ensure that no more families have to endure the heartbreak of losing loved ones in such a violent, preventable way. Mioshi McLoud had done everything in her power to build a new life for herself and her family. She had been through so much, facing setbacks in her music career, struggling with the challenges of single motherhood, and fighting to give her children and grandchildren a better future. But despite all her sacrifices, despite her determination to create a life of peace and opportunity, it wasn't enough. In the end, Mioshi could not protect herself or her granddaughter, Myel, from the very person who should have been her protector, her son, LaRente. Mioshi's decision to leave Seattle for St. Louis had been driven by hope. She believed that if she could just start fresh, if she could put the past behind her, she and Myel would be able to build a new life, free from the struggles that had haunted them. She fought every day to secure a stable home, to provide for Myel, and to give her the opportunity to grow up in a safe environment. She even took a job in security, working tirelessly to ensure their future. This tragedy doesn't just reflect the personal pain of one family. It shines a light on a much larger, deeper issue: mental health and the way society fails to support those who need help the most. LaRente's actions were not the result of an isolated event. They were the tragic end to a long battle with mental health, one that had never been properly addressed. The warning signs were there. Mioshi had seen them, but the systems meant to help, mental health services, the justice system, social support systems, failed them. Families dealing with mentally unstable loved ones often have no idea where to turn. They face immense challenges without the proper resources or guidance. Mioshi had reached out, but she didn't have the tools to get the help LaRente needed. She couldn't fight the battle for him, and she couldn't protect herself or Myel from the consequences of that. This is the painful truth for many families who are left to navigate the storm on their own. It's easy to say, "This won't happen to me," or "This doesn't affect me." But the truth is, this could happen to any of us. We can no longer turn a blind eye to the mental health crisis in our communities. We must ask ourselves, how can we be better advocates for mental health? How can we support those who are struggling before it's too late? In remembering Mioshi and Myel, we must also remember the lessons they leave behind. We must speak up, we must support, and we must push for change. The time to act is now, before more lives are shattered, before more families are torn apart. The tragedy of Mioshi and Myel is a painful reminder that we cannot afford to wait. Mioshi McLoud and Myel Harris will always be remembered, not just for the lives they led, but for the tragic way they were taken. Their story serves as a painful reminder of the dangers that arise when mental health struggles are left untreated. When someone in a family battles with instability, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone around them. The consequences can be catastrophic, and no one should ever have to endure the kind of loss that Mioshi and Myel's family did. This is why it's so important that we continue to speak up and push for changes in how we address mental health, particularly when it comes to ensuring that those who need help the most get the support and treatment they deserve. We can honor their memory by ensuring their story sparks a wider conversation about mental illness. It's crucial that we raise awareness, push for better systems, and most importantly, look out for one another. If you've been impacted by this story, or if you felt the weight of mental health struggles in your own life, please share this video with someone you care about. Start the conversation in your community. Share it on your social media. Let's make sure that we're not just mourning losses, but actively working toward change. Thank you for watching, and thank you for taking the time to reflect on this important issue. Mioshi and Myel's story is one that should never be forgotten, and if it's taught us anything, it's that we all need to be more aware of the struggles happening within our own families, our communities, and the people we love. Stay safe, and remember, if you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health issues, don't hesitate to reach out for help. You're not alone, and there's support available. Let's make sure we're all doing our part to make the world a safer place for everyone. And, as always, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories and important discussions like this one. We'll see you in the next video.